All right, here we are, part two. So, just to recap, part one was all about questions and context. It was about making sure that we limit the potential meanings of a card so that at the end of the day or at the end of the reading or during the reading, we're not overwhelmed by possibilities. So, for example, we draw the hermit and we ask this about, like, how can I practice self care today? Spending some time alone, learning, reading, great. You know what I mean? I don't have to worry about trying to make all of the esoteric associations of the hermit and the astrological associations and the Kabbalistic associations and all of the things I'm reading about and affect me and overwhelm me and make me go like, oh, should I like run away and join a monastery? No. How can I best practice self-care today? Spend some time alone, read, learn something new. That's it. You know what I mean? So questions and context, big thing, because they reduce the potential, they make it easy for us to interpret the cards, and we get less frustrated. And then part two of that was also making sure that the question we ask is really the one that we want to ask. It's the one that's going to be most helpful. Is it about practicing self-care, or is it, what's getting in the way of self-care? Is it, am I practicing too much self-care and I haven't been out in the world? You know what I mean? Whatever the case is. So that we dig deep. And as I said in that video, that coming up with the question when we're reading for ourselves probably should take as long, if not longer, than the actual reading. And that's partly because the better and stronger and clearer the intent or the question, even if it's a general reading and you're setting just a general intention, the better or stronger or clearer it is, the easier it's going to be for you to interpret. So it may take less time because you'll draw the hermit immediately and go, oh, yeah, go to the library, for example. So in the second half of this, we're going to talk about like part two and three of this, which is the two next things, that can make a reading for yourself easier. And the first one is tenacity. And in the previous video, I said I needed tenacity to make that video because I faced every freaking obstacle I could to make these videos, including dealing with every fucking sound in the neighborhood at the time I sat down to do it. Someone literally outside my window on the porch on their speakerphone, cell phone, yapping while I'm recording. Never happened before. Tenacity. In my adult learning life, one of the things that I've learned as a learner and as a trainer is that we spend our day overcoming obstacles. It is what we are wired to do. We're on the road to work. There's a pothole. We go around it. There's traffic. There's nothing in the fridge. Our lives are all constantly made of overcoming obstacles. But when we're faced with sometimes really simple obstacles, we give up really easily. And one of the things I've noticed, and I'm very guilty of this in reading for myself, and I've seen a lot of readers do it too, and I've heard a lot of readers talk about it, is we lack tenacity when reading for ourselves. So we spend all this time coming up with a great question, and it's concise, and it's clear, and it's specific, and it asks what we mean to ask, and then we lay out three cards, and it's like, what the fuck? That makes no sense. And we just give up. I don't have the energy to do this. I'm not good at it. This doesn't work. This is stupid. This is a lie. I shouldn't do this. Everyone's better. And then we downward spiral. And that happens a lot. And I think, again, it's another thing that prevents potentially good readers from continuing, especially when they're learning, when a lot of times you're reading for yourself, because we lack tenacity. We feel like it should be easy. And if it's not easy right away, we give up. And what's interesting, too, is that I think one of the benefits of this YouTube community that we have is that we get to see a lot of people doing this. We get to see a lot of different examples and a lot of people reading and sharing their meanings. But one of the things that happens when you watch someone do a sample reading or a demo or whatever is that it looks really effortless. And that's either because it's a fake reading and that's easy to do, or it's because it's a reader who's been doing it for 20 years, or they are really hot that day and they've been reading for a while, and it can be really intimidating to watch someone really good sit down and do it and say, oh yeah, the hermit means this and this means this and the whole reading's there and here's your whole life story solved. When from us, and after years of reading, I still feel terror every time I read for someone else and I lay out the cards and I'm like, I do not know what these mean. I had that experience at the Reader Studio. I was reading for someone else and I laid out the cards and I thought, I should just go home. It's about tenacity. And what I mean by tenacity is like having the strength and the patience to like sweat it the fuck out when it's not coming easily, when you're just not seeing the thing that you need to see. Um, the answer is there. So, sorry, I just another thought popped into my head. What I want to talk about too is putting too much pressure on it, too much pressure on the brain. So I hope I remember to come back to that. Um, so let's say we came up with a question, and um, the question is just it's like, again, I'm using daily draws a lot as an example because I think that's where a lot of people read for themselves. But let's say it's a daily draw at the beginning of the day. I know that I'm facing an exhausting day of meetings, and then I have to go to this event tonight that seemed like a great idea 3 weeks ago, and that now seems like the last thing in the world I want to do, but I bought the ticket and my friend's relying on me, right? So how do I make the most of this event tonight that I don't want to go to anymore? So let's just say that's the question. So I'm just going to pull some cards and, do this for roll. Backwards card in there. By the way, I don't have an event to go to, thank God, tonight. Especially after all the nonsense of trying to record these videos. So I'm just going to pull 3 cards. All right, so again, how do I make the most of going to this event tonight that I really don't want to go to? So we got the 2 of Wands, and the Magician, and the 9 of Wands. Right, so we pulled this spread, so it was 2, 9, and, no, it was 2 Magician and then Wands, right? Sorry. I get so confused. Let me do this. 2 Magician and then 9. All right. Is that showing up backwards for you? It'll have to work. Oh my God. This is seriously like being in an Escher drawing. This is why I don't do this more often. Coink. All right. So I pull these cards and I'm like, oh my God. Like, what? Wands? That's all about energy I don't have. And the Magician's about like manifesting power. Like, ugh. So I just like give up and I throw the cards back in the deck and I'm like, fuck it. Like, I'm not good at this. Or you can't read for yourself or whatever, which I spent years doing. Tenacity means that we feel that first flush of, OMG, I hate this. And we continue and we sit with it. And sometimes we sweat with it. Now, here's my little footnote to that, which is the more stress we allow ourselves to feel, the more constricted we become, and the less likely it is we'll actually find the answer we're looking for, right? Because we start to get performance anxiety. We start to get restricted. All of this sort of flowy woo-woo stuff that makes this work becomes like, and we're just one giant clench. That's not good. We should not be one giant clench in life. So we have to sweat it out. We have to sit with it and just sort of look at it and listen to it. And I think that one of the things I try to do when I start to feel stressed is to listen to the reading. And by listening to it, I just mean sort of sitting there and sitting with the images and seeing if anything pops out. This is going to be different for everyone. But what I would recommend is that you think about it like math. Everyone's favorite, right? But I mean it. Get yourself a notebook and write out the meaning of each card as you understand it. So I would say, just not even working with the image, that the 2 of Wands is about like unity of passion, right? Just as a general sense. So I write unity of passion. And I'm just kind of picking the first thing that comes to mind, right? Because those quick first intuitive hits to me are often the most important. They will say something more times than not if we just let them go and just let them appear. Even if it's not the traditional meaning of the card, unity of passion is probably not what I would normally interpret the 2 of Cups, the 2 of Wands with. You know what I mean? But that just popped into my head. Unity of passion. Boom. The Magician. I said it earlier. The Magician for me is about manifesting energy, so I write that down. I also think it's about being a conduit for energy, which is about like that moment when you're creating where it just flows through you. You know what I mean? Like if you're a writer, or a painter, or an athlete, whatever, there are those moments where you're just in it. You know what I mean? And you just become a conduit for the electricity. That to me is what the Magician means, so I write that out. The 9 of Wands in the Rider-Waite-Smith system sort of is very burdened and beaten and broken. So you could use that. For me, 9s are about effort and the push to get something done. So I write that down. All right. So I've got the three meanings of my traditional cards. And now it's sort of like playing the memory game or match game. And I look at it and maybe you can move the cards around and you can say the magician first or the nine of wands first, whatever. You can just sort of play. But what you start to do is you start to sit with it and be still as much as you can and try not to let all the doubt and the downward spiral come in. But you commit to staying there until something that makes sense happens. Um, and if you're in a rush, probably it won't. But I have found in my experience that the more you do this, the easier it gets. Now, one of the interesting things that just happened, and this is for real, that I just felt when I said unity of passion for two, um, is that it was this idea of like minds coming together, like things coming together. And so that's the first. Now, none of the rest of this makes sense in the context of the reading so far, right? So far I have a little something with the two, but these two cards, nothing, right? But so I got something. I've got a little ray, I've got a little kernel, unity of passion, and why that makes sense is the idea that there will be like-minded people there tonight, right? At this event I don't want to go to. Unity of passion. So, despite the fact that I'm exhausted, I have something to think about. I have something to enter the reading with now, which is the idea that there will be people there who have a shared interest, a unity of passion, right? So that's cool. All right, that's a place to start. So now I start to feel a little bit better. Okay, I've got a little kernel here. Now, the magician, this idea of manifesting energy, this idea of being a conduit, of being open to the energy. And then I start to do a little word association, right? So open energy, openness. I get a sense of like being receptive. The magician usually has a very active quality, but just sort of associating that, right? If you think about the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith magician with the pose and the wand and the thing, you know what I mean? He's making something happen. But, for me, if I think about that idea of being a conduit, of that moment when the energy is just flowing through you and you're letting it happen, that doesn't happen if you're not open to it, if you're not receptive to it, if you're not feeling available to it. So now I have a little bit more of a sense of people with like-minded, being open to energy, being open to those like-minded people. So unity of passion, openness, energy, let things flow through you. So I'm getting a little bit different read here of the magician than I normally do, in that he's a little bit passive in this case. But that's okay, right? Because who's going to fucking come in and tell me I'm doing this wrong? It's a reading for myself. So, two, unity of passion, the magician being receptive. So if I go tonight, there's going to be other people there that are like-minded, and if I open myself up to it, I'll actually start to feel their energy flow through me. And then the nine of wands, which could be about burden, to me, even just working with the Rider-Waite-Smith system, it's not about burden to me. It's about the fact that anything worth doing costs. So there's that element to it, but it's also, if you think numerologically the way I read, it's about that push to getting the thing done. If you think about the sequence, 9 is the moment before 10. It's the energy that carries you to the completion of the project, to the completion of the cycle, to the completion of the work. So actually, I think about the card that way here. And just remember, these are my experiences. You're going to have your own, but the point is you do the math, and you start doing this sort of gentle math of association. So the nine of wands in this case to me isn't necessarily about burden, even though there is something to play with here in a second, but it's about the push. It's about getting things done, right? So now I have this incredibly interesting situation where there's going to be like-minded people there, and if I'm opening up to them, if I'm receptive to them, I might actually engage someone or some people who will inspire me to or help me push over this thing that I'm working on, right? So this isn't, this is a fake reading, but in the context of my life, that would be really helpful because I'm a writer. I have a lot of projects going all the time, and I often feel sort of defeated and unenthusiastic about stuff I'm working on that people aren't excited about. So what this says is look, boy, you don't want to go, but there's going to be like-minded people there, and if you're open to it and receptive and energetic and open to their energy and absorbing it and connecting with people, there's actually someone there who's going to inspire you or push you to get the thing done that needs to get done. And now I have my reading, and I can take it a little bit further and think about the images too. The images to me are not always super important, but if I think about this using a Rider-Waite-Smith card, of the 9 with that burden, with that, oh, it's the 10 of Wands is the burden one. It's the battle weary, you know what I mean? This is how I feel going in, and yet there's benefit to doing that. We go on, we do it anyway. So there's benefit to going. So that's what I mean by tenacity, and that actually didn't even take that long. Again, it's easy with a fake reading, you know what I mean? But again, it's you stick with it and you just sort of associate it, you know. And I think that that's all reading really is. And it's easier to do when you're alone, when you can kind of make that mess and you can scratch it out. Or I gotta be honest, like one of the reasons I started making videos at all, and if you go back to my very earliest videos, they were all based, I think, on a book by James. I think it's, oh God, I should know this. James Ricklif's Tarot Tells the Tale, I think, is the name of the author, where he did readings for fairy tale characters. And to me as a reader, it was really helpful to have that book to see how he wove the cards together. But it was also helpful for me to go and do it. And that was what I started doing in this channel, was that when I started like going down the tarot YouTube rabbit hole, there wasn't a whole lot of people doing that, and so I decided to put it out there to practice and also to give some examples to people who were like me who wanted that. But the point is, you practice and you do it and you stay with it, and you just tease out the meaning, and you allow yourself to be patient with the cards. And it will get there, you know, and it does, you know, again, I guess the thing is that nothing is 100% foolproof, and nothing works 100% of the time, or at least nothing that's human. And so there are going to be days where you just don't get the answer, you know, there are going to be days where it just doesn't make sense. You keep going, and you're patient with yourself, and you're patient with the cards, and you practice, and you keep going, and you start to get it, you know, you really do. Some of us, you know, again, this is another thing I talk about in my book, is that I think we all have intuitive capabilities. I think we all have the ability to do this. But I think that life situations sometimes set us up with differing degrees of tuned intuition. And just to give you an example, you know, I think folks who grew up I'm trying to choose my words again thoughtfully, but folks who grew up in a situation where they were in danger a little more often, if they didn't have a lot of money and they had to sort of fight for food, or there was a big risk factor in their lives, a person, or, you know, substance abuse, etc., things that were really potentially damaging or dangerous in childhood, I would wager those folks have a bit more connection to their intuition, because that fight or flight reflex that intuition really is, that reactive ability to recognize patterns, was more alert. They were more active with it from a younger age. I think people who grew up in some way as an other in a community, you know what I mean? If you were the one person in the room of one thing, or if you grew up in a culture that's really attuned to it, you might have a more natural openness to your intuition. Some of us all have to work more, you know. And then there are different kinds of intuition. You know, if you live in the city, I guarantee you can tell a car is speeding by before it gets there and that you shouldn't cross the street. Someone who grew up in the country or on a farm might be more attuned to the dangers of the wolves in the background than the speeding car when they go to the city. So it's a different kind of intuition that's opened up. Do you know what I mean? This is all by way of saying that for some of us, it takes practice to open up a certain kind of intuition. You have to keep doing it. But putting pressure on it, putting stress on the muscle, does not make it get easier. You know, when you start to feel the frustration, when you start to feel the downward spiral, breathe, set it aside, come back to it, and wait until you're ready to sit down and keep teasing out the meaning. Keep working at the math. Excuse me. Think of it like a proof. You know, mathematicians, for some odd reason, love the process of doing the math. So this is that version for us. Enjoy it, you know. Sometimes it's not about the answer. Sometimes it's about getting there, which is a shitty thing to say, right? Because we just want answers in life. But if we're learning, if we're starting out especially, it's the journey, not the destination a lot of days. So that's what I mean by tenacity. We give up too easily. You know, I read in a book somewhere or in a blog, and I wish I could remember, it was 100 years ago, you know, that you lay out the cards and you say, yep, I know what that means, and you sweep it back up into the deck. And I do that all the time. But if we were to sit with them for a little while and really dig into them and be tenacious with the reading, we might find more than what we thought was there. And oftentimes I when I allow myself to do this, which is not a strong point because I'm not a patient person, but when I have allowed myself to do that, I actually find things in cards that I was totally not expecting, regardless of the system, whether it's a Marseille or Pip style or the Rider-Waite-Smith system, or something else. So tenaciousness is key when reading for ourselves. Sitting there and living it, sitting there and experiencing it, and being patient with ourselves, and trying not to get stressed, and trusting that the answer will come. And then I guess my other footnote on that before I move into the final piece is that I find frequently that I already know a lot of the answers that tarot is going to give me. I've been in therapy, since I was in my early 20s because of anxiety and other things, and doing that has made me really self-aware. I don't frequently get mind-blowing readings when I read for myself. They generally do not blow my mind and make me go, oh shit, like I never thought about that before. Because I spend so much of my day and my life in the past 15 years learning about myself, So and this isn't like a humble brag, it's a byproduct of really digging deep with my therapist to learn who I am and how I exist in the world. So frequently, tarot for me is affirmational or confirmational is maybe a better way to say it. It tells me when I think I'm right, for the most part. It's a nice validator when I'm reading for myself, especially when I'm getting into like the psychological work. And so the reason I'm bringing that up is just allow yourself to not expect mind-blowing readings. A lot of people who come to tarot are empathic, empathetic, self-aware, things that you naturally need to be a good reader, or to even be drawn to doing this, So don't expect to have your mind blown every morning when you lay out a spread. Allow the reading to be subtle. Allow it to tell you something that you already know, and allow that to be like, okay, yeah, I thought that was the right thing to do, and it is. So don't, I guess my point is, like, you're not going to get fireworks every time. Where it has been most interesting for me when I read for myself is actually when I have a problem I don't know how to solve. Like at work, I will sit down and say, I have to try, this was a real thing. I have to train call center associates on world geography in 7 20-minute sessions or something like that. And so I did a reading. And I used a Marseille deck, and I drew 3 cards, and I don't remember what they were. I think it was the Magician, and then the Magician was definitely in it. And I had that moment of like, ugh, this isn't helpful, it's 3 cards, whatever. And I had the instinct to sweep them back in the deck and say, screw it, but I didn't. I sat there, I was tenacious, and I realized from doing that reading, just to give you an example, the Magician, in this case, was not the way I just interpreted him now. He was a trickster. And what I realized I had to do was trick people into caring about it, trick people into learning. So I needed to find a way into the learning, into the training, that actually tricked people and deceived them into learning something new. And I can't remember the other cards. I have it. I think I have it. I think it might actually be in Tarot on Earth. It solved my problem because I was tenacious. I sat there and I found a way to come at the problem, in a practical, really useful way. And that was mind-blowing. That's where tarot kind of blows my mind. So that's where the fireworks tend to come. So just, I guess the thing is, like, be realistic about what you can expect. If you're in therapy and you're doing the work and you've been doing it for 10 years, you may not have, like, holy shit revelations all the time. They may happen, but not all the time. So that's like a little caveat there. So the final thing is check yourself. And so I talked about this in part 1, which is when you come up with a question, check and make sure it's the question you're asking. But as you go through, make sure it's the question you want to ask and that's something that's helpful. But you check yourself through the whole process. And all I mean by that is just sort of like bouncing back and forth as so with the 3 cards I chose, they're still here. I came up with this interpretation of like, there's going to be people there that are like-minded, and if you're open to it and you're open to their energy and receiving that, then they'll help you finish a project, right? Like, just as a quick summary. As I go through a reading, and actually this goes for any kind of reading, whether it's for me or someone else, I want to keep sort of checking in with myself and these little flights of fancy that I take as I go through the cards, right? So, for example, I started with the 2 of Wands as, what did I say? unity of passion or something like that. So I get that, and I'm like, boom, cool intuitive hit. Great. Now I can move on. But what I also want to do is just check that against what I know about the card. Does that make sense? Or am I like way too far off? You know what I mean? Is that just projecting? You know, is there any evidence that I could use those keywords or that thing in this card? You know, and it's not a hard and fast science, but you just want to sort of feel confident that there's evidence in the card. And Camellia Elias again talks about finding evidence in the reading. And I guess that's what I mean, is that as you interpret each card, connect it to the question. Is it still answering the question I'm asking? Or have I started going down a path that's answering another question? You know, the question was, how do I make them, I can't even remember what the question was now. How do I make the most out of this event I don't want to go to? I think that was what I said, which is one reason why it's good to write your questions down. And so I look at this interpretation of that card, and it's like, I say, okay, cool, all right. I find unity of passion, I find that in the card, that makes sense to me. And then I check that against the question. Yeah, okay, I can start to connect that. And actually doing that, which I didn't say out loud, but that was the thing that actually unlocked the reading for me back then. If you remember, I said I had this moment with the Two of Wands where I was like, this is the key. So, and part of that came from checking the intuitive hit of unity of passion against the card, and then against the question, unity of passion, this event, unity of passion. I'm going to find someone there who's a like-minded, you know what I mean? So then I do that with the magician, you know, the magician as being open and manifesting. Does that feel, you know, open and receptive? Now, the magician is traditionally active, but is that, you know, appropriate? Am I going too far from what I believe the magician means? Same thing for the Nine of Wands. And then I came up with that final solution, the final answer, and I say, okay, does that really gel with these cards? Am I really interpreting these cards, or is that something I'm projecting? So I check the final answer against the cards, feel good. I check the answer against the question. Does it actually answer the question? Yes. If it doesn't, then I dig more and I check myself. And that's another thing that I think is really key. And again, it's part of the tenaciousness thing, is that when we finally get the answer, that we check the answer against the question and make sure that it actually answered the question and that the answer is remotely useful. Again, as I just said, we can't expect mind-blowing revelations every time, but does it answer the question in a way that's helpful? You know, my question was, how do I make it through this, or how do I make the most of this thing I don't want to go to? And the answer was, if you go, you'll find people who are of a like mind. And if you're open to them, they'll actually find a way within you to sort of push you to the next, or to finish the project, for example. And I check that, how do I make the most of this? Yeah, that answers the question. I go there, I'm receptive, I'm open, I find people who are of a like mind, and I'm open to what they tell me, and that helps me unlock a project, for example. So we check, and we just keep sort of checking back and forth so that we don't stray too far from the path. I think we do stray from the path. I believe that, you know, again, quoting Camellia Elias a lot in this video, that meaning doesn't exist. What I've interpreted that statement as is that it's elastic. You know, the magician is not always a trickster. Sometimes it's the manifestation of energy. Sometimes it's being a conduit. Sometimes it's being open to energy, you know. But I check it against what I know about the card to make sure that I'm not going too far. The magician, for example, is not secret knowledge. That's the High Priestess, you know. So I'm making sure that I'm not trying to impose another card's meaning on that card, because there's another card that means that, you know. So that's you know, am I interpreting the magician, or am wishing the High Priestess were here? You know what I mean? If I'm wishing the High Priestess were here and I'm using that card, I'm like, nope. You know, this secret knowledge stuff, that's the High Priestess. So got to go back to the drawing board. What does the magician mean here? You know, so it's just to use this math analogy again, it's like checking your work. And you're just making sure, unlike math, there is no right answer, but you're making sure that the work that you've done is logical in the context of the question and the cards that you drew. You know, and you just keep checking with yourself, and it keeps you on the path. And if you find that you're going off the path, you say, okay, all right, I'm getting a little far away. That's okay. The imagination's powerful. Let me come back to what I know about the magician, and let me work through that. You know, and again, I guess I would say finally, if you check yourself, and at the end of the day, you're like, this magician means secret knowledge. It just does. Fine. The magician means secret knowledge in this reading, and that's okay too. And that may piss people off. But again, you're reading for yourself. So ain't nobody going to come and tell you you're doing it wrong. And the point of this video is not to tell you to do it right. It's to make it easier for you so you don't throw in the towel and that you actually get something out of it. So, yeah. So check yourself. But don't be so rigid that, again, you cripple yourself or that you put too much pressure on the muscle. The checking yourself is just about making sure that you are finding a connection between the card and the question, and that the relationship has some logic in this very illogical thing we're doing. So that's that. Those are the 3 tips. First is question and context. Be clear, be specific. If you're not going to have a question, have a clear and specific intent. And again, what I mean by that is, I want this card pull to be the thing where I explore what the magician looks like over the course of any given day. And I'm going to write down any time. So that's like a clear intent. It's better than just picking up the deck and saying, Ace of Cups. That's my card for the day. Everything's Ace of Cups. Intent of, I want to explore how the Ace of Cups manifests, and I'm committing to writing down how it does over the course of every day. That's different than Ace of Cups is my card of the day, But I'm a fan of questions too. So clear, specific questions. Make sure it's the question you really mean, and that it's getting you closer to the answer that you want. Be tenacious. Don't sweat. I use the term sweat and work through it. It's a gentle wet. It's a gentle sweat. It's a gentle work. Engage it. Stay with it. Don't give up on it. And then check yourself. Give yourself the gift of just connecting back to the question, connecting back to your traditional meaning of the card. Am I going too far? Is this making sense? Am I answering the question I asked? And that last one, by the way, is, I think, for all readings, including readings we do for other people. We should find evidence in the cards to support the question or the answer that we're giving. If the question is, should I leave my boyfriend, and we're saying yes, we need to show the evidence of why. This card suggests that there's hurt. This card suggests a dead end, and this card suggests abuse. Gosh, not to get that dark, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't even know that I would say that in a reading, but we have the evidence. It's not just me saying, yeah, he's trash. You know what I mean? I have to have evidence. The reading is the evidence. The question is the research. The evidence is the cards, and in a way the question is like the thesis statement, and I keep having to prove that thesis statement with the cards. It's like writing a paper. So I've incorporated everyone's favorite, math and thesis papers. But I hope this helps and opens folks up who are struggling with reading for yourself, because I think these 3 little things can be boundlessly helpful in becoming better at reading for yourself. And when you're confident reading for yourself, I think that bleeds into reading for others as well. So that is what I have for you. I hope this was interesting. I hope it was helpful. Take care, and we'll talk soon.